Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Doherty, and I am the manager for Maryland Relay. I'm truly excited to have our second NASRA webinar today for talking about RCC. And I'm going to welcome those four panelists and our interpreters as well to come on up. Outstanding. Thank you all for doing so. Got you all on deck. My interpreters can go off camera. Thank you, ladies. Let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. Let's start with Deborah Bear Rogers. She comes to us from the great state of Maine. You can introduce yourself. Hello there. We'll allow you to go more in depth on your introduction shortly. Lori Solinsky from Wyoming is with us. Say hello. Hi, Lori. Also joining us, Mary Taylor from Montana. Hi, Mary. Also joining us, Holly Bice from Colorado. Holly is also the chair of NASRA. NASRA stands for the National Association of Relay Administrators. And so Holly, if you would like to give a few remarks, I will turn the screen over to you for a NASRA spotlight moment. Thank you, Travis. Well, we're very excited to participate in this panel. Reason being is that there are many folks who are coming and asking how they might avail of RCC services in their respective state programs and what the process sort of looks like and what the pros and cons of RCC are, how it includes, the TRS system and how it is a great way that we have today to take advantage of the states that are already operating RCC services. We have experiences to share, feedback to share. Some states, of course, have not yet availed of those services, but we do thank you, Travis, for your leadership in the state of Maryland, for the foresight in hosting this webinar, which is excellent. We're very, very excited to get underway for a discussion of the service for RCC. All righty. Thank you for that wonderful introductory remark, Holly. And for our audience, if you have questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat panel, and I will be feeding those questions. And we'll get to as many as we can, time permitting. But please send your questions in so that we can follow up as we proceed. Also, we have a prepared list of questions for our panelists, so they might cover some of the questions that you already have come with. All righty. We'll get underway. I'll allow our panelists to introduce themselves and explain what their role at state government is, how they have been working in RCC, etc. So, Deborah, we'll have you up first.
Hi, my name is Deborah Bear Rogers. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. I have cranky earbuds today, so hopefully they'll make it this hour. It's been an interesting technology day. So I provide the outreach for the telecommunications relay services here in Maine. I'm the one who travels the state and or works virtually to share all the information about the relay services. And it said to say one unique thing about me. I don't know if it's really unique, but since I've been home in the COVID, I have gotten 4 hens, and my daily chore is to go out after lunch and gather chicken eggs during my break. So, and I grew up with no known hearing loss and started losing my hearing about 8 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deborah. Lori, let's hear from you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Solinsky from Wyoming, and I oversee the Wyoming Relay Program, which also includes equipment distribution. In Wyoming, we are housed under the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, so that's a little different than some of the other states. And I think as we start talking about RCC, that impacts kind of our philosophical viewpoint, maybe in some ways. So I'll touch on that later. And then an interesting thing about me, a lot of times people talk about their pets. So I have a couple dogs and cats, but I used to have a goat. And my goat made the police blotter in the small town that I live in. The neighbors called at night. The goat was an escape artist and went up to the neighbor's house, and they thought they had an intruder, and the police were called, and unfortunately it was my goat. So anyways, that's one of the interesting things about me. Travis, now one of the things with the first question with the intro was to talk about the providing it without a mandate. Did you want us to do that now or later?
Actually, we're going to treat that next, Lori. Let's go ahead and allow Mary to introduce herself.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mary Taylor, and I'm the program manager for Montana Telecommunications Access Program, also known as MTAP in Montana. I've been here since July of 2018, and our program is under a state agency of the Department of Public Health and Human Services. We are part of the Disability Employment and Transitions Division. And something unique about me is I'm a Montana native, born at the on the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation in north central Montana, which is where I was raised, a member of the Grovant tribe. And actually my middle name is Teresa. It comes from my late great grandmother, Teresa Lamble, who was a full-blooded member of the Grovant tribe. She was also somewhat of a celebrity in her golden years. She was one of the few people that still spoke Grovant fluently and was known for many years as the oldest full-blooded member of the tribe. I won't go into any details of her accomplishments, but she's actually listed out on Wikipedia, and she has an education resource center named in her honor out in Hayes, Montana. So I'm just proud to carry on the legacy of her name, and that's what I'd like to share today, what that's unique about me.
Excellent addition. I love hearing stories like that. All right, for our next panelist, go right ahead, Holly. Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Weiss, and I hail from Colorado. Actually, technically, I'm from Texas, but I'm resident in Colorado. And that's where I work with the Public Utilities Commission, the PUC. And our TRS program is housed under the PUC. I have held this position since 2015, but I have been involved in the relay industry since 2011. And I think it's going to be really cool to do this. The opportunity to talk about myself. I'm not a cool person, but I don't have anything else to say. Nothing else comes to mind, Travis. Not at all, Holly. You're very active in the community and you have been with us for many years. So we wanted to go ahead and fire off some quick questions for like a lightning round of how many years you've offered RCC services. In Maryland, we've offered RCC since just March of 2020. We're still very much in the nascent stages now. We're about a year old and some change. Deborah, how many years have you offered RCC services in Maine?
Oh, trick question. This is Deborah. I should know that. I've only been here 4 years doing it in the state of Maine. So long before me, that's my answer.
Fair enough, Deborah. Certainly more than 4 years, we can assume, which is frankly pretty long for this service. Lori.
Wyoming started offering RCC in 2018.
Excellent. Mary.
So the last RFP for our program was done in 2016, and that was included in our RFP. So about 5 years, I think.
Excellent. Holly? We have offered it since July of 2015. Oh, well, then I'm the new kid on the block. Impressive. Y'all got more years in the service than I do, certainly. So we have some other questions that we'd like to talk through. My journey through the first year has shown me that states pretty much practice and set their systems up in very different ways. The rules are different, the systems are different, the policies are different, and the operations are quite different. Is there anything significant that you can share from your state with other states who have yet to offer RCC services that you might recommend being included in an RFP? Or do you have some kind of best practice tidbit that would benefit this population who would be significant users of it? Also, some of the questions that we'll also be treating is, as you know, RCC is not a mandatory service. And my question would then be, what brought your state to the point of offering it? And how did they go about including it in the suite of services? How did you arrive at that point? So let's start off with Deborah, if you would.
These questions are a little bit different than the notes, Travis, but yes. Let's see. So why did we choose to offer RCC in our state? Actually, we responded to the state RFP, the need for it and the request for it. Adding this value-added service, obviously not mandated, like you said. And so following those requirements, as well as we are a state that different times a year, trying to get up to an in-person meeting is not always possible. So being able to offer a conference call or a virtual option with captioning has been very versatile and useful in our state.
Travis speaking. Lori, did you have something to add?
Sure. So I had started working on our RFP back in about 2017. And the year leading up to the RFP, I probably had at least 3 customers, if not more, come to mind that came to me that were struggling and wanting a solution for conference calls. In recollecting, I think most all of those were CapTel users. And we tried to make that solution work on those conference calls. And at the time, most of those conference calls were teleconference calls, audio, not as much video like we're seeing now. And this kind of ties into how I look at things. So we have always kind of looked at the philosophy that came from Title IV of the ADA and the underlying philosophy with the FCC, that the purpose of relay is to provide functional access to telephone, making telephone calls, telecommunication functional access. And so to me, as these individuals were approaching me saying, I can't participate in these calls very well, CapTel's not working, and can't keep up, are there other solutions? I felt like what was out there wasn't functionally equivalent, and RCC was the best answer. And so we looked around at what other states were doing and included that in our RFP, and then went from there.
Thank you very much, Lori. And let's just maintain protocols of identifying oneself before making a remark, just so that our CART record can make sure that they get the speakers identified. Mary, we'll turn it to you.
Okay, this is Mary, and I wasn't here when we bid out the last RFP, but it was included in our RFP as an optional relay service. And I know that since I've been here, I've found it to be extremely valuable. We use it. I have staff all over the state, so we use it a lot for staff meetings. We use it for committee meetings. I know that we have a very proactive governor's committee that oversees our program, and I'm pretty sure that they were involved with, you know, kind of approaching the remote conference captioning as an option. But again, I wasn't here at the time, so I don't know exactly why our program decided to offer it, but every year we have the option of renewing it in our contract, and we definitely always choose to renew it because we've just found it to be so advantageous. It's been used for our committee meetings successfully for the last year. And I just had a lot of really good feedback from people who do use it. That has just made a world of difference in being able to communicate. So.
Travis speaking. Holly, we'll turn it to you to introduce yourself in your state. I think the same holds true in Colorado as for other states. When I took this position, RCC wasn't in the menu of options that we offered. And our provider at the time in 2014 was AT&T, which simply didn't have the option for RCC, but they got out of the business entirely, folded that arm of their services, and the new RFP had both versions of services to be offered. Both vendors would offer those RCC services. So we weren't entirely sure about adding it because of the cost and because it was not something that we were sure about. So we ultimately came to the determination that for the consumers, we noticed that technology continued to evolve. Folks were not so much using traditional TRS as much, and we wanted to get ahead of the game, and we wanted to make sure that we provided the services that deaf and hard of hearing folks, those customers, would eventually use. And we have certainly seen a downtick in the numbers of TRS, so that has borne out in the data. So I think it's a significant and valuable service, and it's been a positive thing, surely. When you say that numbers have gone down, you're absolutely right. And it is an absolute fact that among states, some of them have, the RCC minutes have already surpassed the TRS minutes. So truly, TRS is on the wane, and the changes are in front of us. At the same time, I think that we can see roughly, I don't know, it could be inaccurate, but there are roughly 10 states that sort of have RCC as a part of their menu of services. And that's not many. Of course, it's not even mandatory. So if we take a look at this significant service that's obviously going to be used, especially in this day and age with meetings as they are, this is something we need to have in place. Certainly, you know, COVID has changed our culture immensely. And I think that this will follow suit from state to state. And as RFPs go out, I suppose you would recommend including this. And the next question that I have for our panel is, now that you have RCC up and running in your state, what are the biggest challenges that you've been confronted with in terms of getting the contract underway and starting to operationalize it? So I'll have anyone who feels to speak to that go ahead and start us off. Holly, go right ahead. Yeah, it wasn't a challenge to get it up and running. That part was relatively easy. But it was more so the numbers of minutes were quite low at the outset. And we wanted to do outreach to make sure we got the word out for people to actually use the service that we had on offer. But it's a bit of egg on our face because we didn't do the right outreach. Then we opened it up to, you know, news outlets, print media, getting articles placed. And we noticed that the minutes really started to take off big time. And so we didn't have a way to verify that these were legitimate users or vet them as deaf and hard of hearing folks. So we had some RCC repeat regular customers, like, you know, 10 hours a day upwards of. And we thought that, well, that struck us as odd for those numbers. That felt quite high. And so we did our due diligence and our research, and we realized that tons of people, well, tons of agencies and organizations were using RCC for everything. They used it to transcribe their meeting minutes for free. They used it to have just general meetings that weren't even inclusive of people participating with hearing loss. So honestly, we had a great deal of struggles with that and asking folks how they were using RCC. And I think that we had a disconnect in the fact that people were using it too much. And indeed, they thought it was like an ASR speech recognition situation. And so they didn't necessarily see the cost behind providing that service. And, you know, we've actually talked through this with some of our customers who have used RCC, and we saw that people were more understanding. And now, frankly, the minutes are much more manageable. And also, we did set up some authorizations.
I don't even remember where I was, to be completely honest. That's no problem. Okay, so to reiterate my question, biggest challenge, I remember you were saying, Holly, you were speaking to the fact that you did a lot of advertising, a lot of getting the word out there, and the numbers started to go up and got to a certain point, and then okay, so really our mistake is we decided to go forward and set up an authorization process within the state. And I'll talk about that more in detail later. But there was an approval process that went along with that. Okay. Anything else you want to add in terms of biggest challenges when it comes to setting up or establishing RCC? Anybody else? Mary, would you like to speak to your state, or Lori? Sure, go ahead.
So like Holly said, we, in the last year, we had over a 400% increase in RCC minutes. And we didn't experience any operational challenges that I can really think of. But I do agree with Holly that the biggest challenge is messaging and how you choose to educate and message regarding the service. And that continues to be a challenge for us, I think, in a lot of different areas. I think we have individuals in the community that are not using it that could benefit from it, from like family meetings. I think that's underutilized and we could message better to increase that use. We have done a number of webinars, and a lot of the attendees joining that have been agencies. And one of the things they've asked is, we're going to do a webinar, we're going to have a meeting, and we don't know if there will be a deaf or hard of hearing participant available. Can we just offer RCC? So we've had to try to educate and message about, help them educate how the service works, how to contact and request the service. And then another messaging challenge we have had is, again, in the last year, the number of senior citizens and elderly people that have not really utilized the technology, that are trying and want to, and kind of struggle with just understanding how it works and how we provide education and training and help to them. So to me, kind of across the spectrum, it's a lot of challenges related to education, outreach, and messaging.
Absolutely. Deborah, did you want to add something?
Yes, kind of to piggyback what Lori was talking about, because my work is the outreach, is getting connected to consumers and agencies. So when everything went virtual overnight, there was that added challenge and as well as opportunity to be like, okay, now everybody can use RCC. Here's how it works. It's for video conferences. It's wonderful. And for a lot of the people that I worked with, it was like, okay, let's make sure that your computer has internet. Okay, this is what a web browser is. This is what a mouse is. So some of the challenge was even getting them to the point of being comfortable using technology. And I've learned a lot in the last year about that, kind of taking it back and like, yes, I can say RCC and captioning and it's accessible. But Laura, you also mentioned about family meetings. It's been also a great opportunity. I've done a lot of outreach, obviously, and virtual meetings and conferences and appointments, and been invited to some of these things. Can you set up RCC so we can show mom? She's in, she's in this state, but we're in this state, and I have hearing loss. I want to be able to use it and show mom what it looks like. So it's been kind of like a challenge, but at the same time, kind of opened up some unusual opportunities to share about it. So I just wanted to add that in as well as it's just kind of, I've learned a lot. It's been a lot with a lot of great things having RCC available as something as a part of Maine to be able to share with others.
Excellent. Did you want to add anything else, Mary?
Sure, this is Mary. And again, RCC was already had taken off in Montana when I started. And I would say that overall, it definitely has gone up in use, especially, last year we had 1 month, I think it was in April, where a third of our invoice was for RCC services. But I think that one of the biggest challenges is just kind of knowing, how much is it going to cost us this month? So far, it hasn't been anything out of any, budget wise, it hasn't been an issue for us. But we are seeing the numbers increase, and we're actually kind of excited about that. We've been kind of promoting it on our website and also on our Facebook page. We haven't done some of the advertising that Holly mentioned, like in newspapers and such. Possibly an idea, but I can also see, we're trying to, I think we started out trying to just focus it on the areas and the places where we thought people that would use these services would see them. But overall, we really haven't had too many challenges with it at all. We've just seen the benefits of it. So I guess the only big challenge that we've had, if anything, is just not knowing how much it might cost us and making sure that it fits within our budget.
Okay, this is Travis. As soon as you said newspapers, Holly put her hand up. Apparently she wants to comment on that. So Holly, go ahead. Wow. So my recommendation when it comes to your advertising, make sure it is extremely targeted. Make sure it is very specific to specific individuals who have a hearing difference, because that was our error. We did very general blanketed advertising in newspapers. Like, for example, the Denver Post, so forth and so on. And then individuals started using it incorrectly. Now we have a much better handle and much better control on our advertising. And we focus on specific niche groups that we know have individuals within them who have a different hearing status, who have hearing loss, and we're able to kind of provide a little more oversight managerially of how that works with the advertising. So don't make your advertising too broad, because if you do that, everyone will want to get on board and use this service because they really don't understand the charges that are behind it.
Exactly. I heard that. And
they assume it's like automatic speech recognition type of technology oftentimes. So
thank you.
This is Travis. Holly, maybe you would mind explaining, the result of that, what ended up happening, if you could go into a little bit more detail with the situation that came up with the religious organizations. So Suggs are our preferred vendor. They were the ones who were able to provide this. I personally am the TRS manager, so I see the requests come in. And I was able to see that there was a church and there was a school, and seeing these requests come in, the one from the church in particular gave me pause, because it's a mega church here in the Colorado area. And I just thought to myself, I feel like, they should be providing access. I'm wondering where RCC comes into play here. So we went ahead and confirmed that request. And then it ended up that there were some customers that weren't using it appropriately. Another example is businesses who have ample funding and should be paying, for services were requesting it. There was also another situation with the school where they were using it for in-person instruction. It was not remote. It was actually in person. The folks were all in the same space. Individuals themselves being hard of hearing, and they were using RCC for within their own classroom. I mean, I wish we could use RCC for in-person events, presentations, things of that nature. I wish we could take advantage of it in that way. However, that's not permitted. And I see two downsides to that. The reason is, firstly, our budget is not equipped to handle that level of usage if it were to be in person. And also it takes the responsibility and the onus off of the business or the organization to provide equal access. You know, the school itself, for example, should be providing that access for its students. They shouldn't be relying on an RCC service. It should be the school's responsibility. I mean, the EIP for students, you know, RCC might not be appropriate depending on that student's EIP or IEP. So I think it's very important to have conversations with the clients, with the customers, and ask them how they're utilizing RCC, and then make determinations from there as to whether or not that's an appropriate use or not. We have had several customers that we determined it was not an appropriate use of RCC. And that really then leads to our implementation of an actual screening process, which we began in September of last year. Now the state of Colorado is able to see all of the requests that come in. And then we make the determination whether to accept that request or not. And if we accept that request, then it is routed to the caption company. If it's deemed inappropriate, we can decline it at that point. So we have a little bit more control, a little bit more oversight in terms of who's making those requests. This is Travis. Actually, that leads to my next question. So you were just explaining very briefly the process of approving or authorizing those requests. So my next question for all of you is, where are your states in terms of that, in terms of filtering requests or vetting requests? Do you have any type of process and procedure in place, or is it the wild, wild west type of concepts? What do you at this point, I guess, do to provide that level of oversight for those folks who are utilizing RCC service to ensure that they're utilizing it appropriately? I can start off with Deborah if you'd like to answer.
Hi, this is Deborah. So I don't work directly in that part of use of RCC, but I can speak to some of the things that we do to help prevent misuse. For example, when people register, they self-certify that they're deaf, hard of hearing, or have a speech difficulty, or that they're setting up RCC for somebody that's attending an event that is deaf, and they're deaf, hard of hearing, or have a speech disability. Plus, they have to utilize, they have to have a main phone number in order to register as well. So those are some of the things that we do to help ensure that it's being used properly. Maybe somebody else can speak to more specifically to that question as well.
Lori or Mary?
This is Lori. So we have the same requirements that Deborah mentioned. There has to be, when they register, there has to be a Wyoming phone number involved, and they have to self-certify that there will be a participant that's deaf, hard of hearing, and needs a service. But other than that, we don't screen like Holly does. I watch pretty carefully the reports that come in each month as to who's utilizing the service, and we haven't had any abuse yet. The other thing is I work pretty closely with our account manager. And so we had an instance where a school district wanted to use that for their virtual learning. And again, in discussing that with our account manager, I felt that that was a service to be provided under IDEA as part of the students' EIPA. And so we did not, and we did education with that school district on that. So that's how we're kind of monitoring it. And so far, we haven't had a lot of abuse.
Mary?
Yes, this is Mary. And when a person wants to use RCC in our state, they have to fill out the online application and put in their name and their email address. And then they do have to self-certify by clicking the button that somebody that needs this service for accessibility is using it and that they're a Montana resident. But other than that, there's no other verifications that have to be done at this time. Although we are looking at that as a possibility because we really haven't had too much abuse that we know of so far in the use of it in Montana. But definitely something that we're keeping an eye on because we have seen our numbers increase, especially this last year. And so we are aware that, you know, that might be something we have to put into place in the near future.
Holly, go ahead. Did you want to add something else? Yeah, I just wanted to mention, this is Holly. So the word abuse, I don't know if that's the right term per se. And the reason being is because there are many people who honestly, it's a lack of education. They don't know about how RCC should be used. They're not, you know, intentionally trying to take advantage of a service or abuse it. I think it's very important when we have these conversations with individuals, we do a little bit of education on our part and we let them know that we recognize that they're not trying to take advantage of the system. It's just an issue of, you know, them not knowing how it's supposed to be used. Deborah, did you want to add something else?
Yes, this is Deborah. Again, kind of like what Holly said, but I also wanted to touch base on that aspect as well, the education and the outreach. You know, I have had some consumers and agencies reach out and be like, I've heard of RCC, can we use that for this situation? And, you know, sometimes I give them the different types of things that are out there and resources out there, and it may not be RCC. As well as I've had them ask some very specific questions because they want to know, is it okay for me to use this? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes CART is a better option, or, you know, or remote CART versus in person. So a lot of times it is education. They don't know. They want to provide the access. They just don't know, am I allowed to do this? Or are we allowed to do this? So I think that's another important point as well.
This is Travis. Thank you, Deborah, for that. And thank you, everyone, for your comments so far. It's really interesting to see the progress you've made in terms of monitoring procedures in particular. Here in the state of Maryland, when we began in March of 2020, we had no oversight or monitoring procedures established because it was a brand new service. As things took off and the minutes went up, we're talking about several thousand minutes a month now. At this point, we've grown astronomically. We are starting to recognize we're seeing more and more requests, and I'm offering the option to possibly monitor every request. And I'm not sure if that's a direction we should go in, because to monitor every request, that's extremely time consuming. That's a large level of oversight. And I would hate for somebody not to receive the service because I overlooked a request. So I'm just wondering if there's technical strategies I could utilize to overcome that, but that's a potential situation. So I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts on this particular subject? Setting up maybe a user database of sorts where individuals that we've identified could then register, they could have an account, and they could go in and request RTT services that way, almost like a gateway. For once an individual's been approved as a user, they could make unlimited requests and we wouldn't have to monitor every single one because they would have already been identified as somebody who's utilizing RCC appropriately. Thoughts on that approach, or is it better, you think, to monitor each request individually? Holly, can you speak to that? So actually the situation I recently mentioned, you know, Colorado has that. So the first time an individual makes a request, that request comes through to us, the point of contact. Oh, the PC, Public Utilities Commission, PUC. Thank you for that clarification. So we get the request, the PUC. And then we at that point are able to, based on looking at the request, vet it as approved and appropriate. Or if we have any doubts and we're not sure, for example, if it's missing information or the information is very rudimentary, I can then send an email to the individual just to get some additional clarification, to get some additional information about the request specifically. And then if we decide from that point to approve it, maybe the individual's deaf and hard of hearing, or if they make requests often for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, we add them as we have a permanently approved list that they are then added to. And from that point forward, the requests do not come to the PUC. They are rerouted directly to the caption company. So once that person is vetted, we don't need to vet them continuously every time they make a request, and the PUC doesn't have to do that approval every time a request comes in. In addition to that, if they get permanent approval, we make that decision. We can also make a decision to approve them on a case-by-case basis, or we can make the decision to decline them. Sometimes I'll approve somebody one time. There are very rare situations, where maybe they don't plan to utilize RCC often. It's maybe a one-off, so that's a one-time approval. They wouldn't go on the permanent list at that point. And it's nice that you mentioned possibly overlooking a request. Our system, if I were to, example, miss a request and not respond with either an approve or decline within a 24-hour period, it will automatically approve it, which is one approach, I would say, to help reduce or minimize the risk of people not getting the services if they possibly need it. And we're still, of course, finding some bugs in the system. And we're working on making our system more streamlined. But so far, I would have to say it's functioning pretty well. Now, absolutely, initially, it was a little time consuming because every request was a brand new one. So a lot were coming through the PUC and we had to vet them all. But now that we have a pretty robust permanent request list, a permanent approved list, I would say I get maybe 2 brand new requests a week. The remainder are from that list. So the time investment has definitely decreased. Thank you, Holly. This is Travis. That definitely helps us understand a little bit better, the process for any new state that would be considering adopting RCC services. So thank you. Deborah, Mary, Lori, any comments from you guys on how your states are implementing this? All right, moving on to our next exciting question. Because you guys have so many combined years experience with RCC, what do you envision the future holding for RCC technology? Do you feel like it's going to remain very similar to what we have now? Do you see improvements in the future? What's your vision for the future of RCC? I'm going to start off with Deborah.
This is Deborah. I'm still thinking of my amazing answers. Actually, just the broadening to more states, I would really love to see that. As we're doing more and more events and conferences, even if I go to an event that's not using RCC, I'm talking about RCC and Relay. And I've talked to some people and they're like, that's wonderful. I can't find it in my state. And so I'm like, well, move to Maine. And so I would just like to see it just be more versatile to where, or more broad spread. Not the word I want, but to where everybody's using it. So, because I have seen that sometimes where people move to a different state and it's not something that's available to them. That's been the biggest thing that I've seen in that part of it.
Lori, did you want to add?
So I see, especially in the short term, continued growth potential for RCC. I think that what we saw with the pandemic and the increase in conference calls of all variety, now that we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic, I hope, and hopefully it's not a train, that the the technological use is going to continue, and I think that's one of the benefits. And with that will come increased demand for RCC. I think at the same time, competing options will continue to grow. I mean, one of the technological challenges, for example, Sprint is our provider, and RCC doesn't integrate automatically with Zoom. And Zoom is such a the most popular video platform out there. And so they didn't offer great captioning options, but at the threat of being sued, now they offer an ASR option as part of Zoom. And I think we'll see more ASR competing. So this will lead to education of when is RCC better, how's it better, who can it serve, when is ASR an acceptable alternative, and when do people need to have live cart, which is a whole nother thing too, because I know in the last year we used RCC for some of our meetings. We also used CART, and we had CART scheduled a couple meetings and they bailed because they didn't have enough captioners. And so it's kind of a Wild West out there, I think, in terms of demand, and I think that will continue in the near future. So that's my take on it. That's my crystal ball.
Thank you. I completely agree. Mary, did you want to add something?
Well, this is Mary, and I guess I just see it, as it's out there longer, more people being able to use it and understanding how to use it, and also just other companies like Zoom being able to allow us to incorporate that into our meetings. I know that when I first started here, we had to click on a separate link to get the remote conference captioning or the relay conference captioning to come up, and sometimes that was an issue. And so now our relay provider has been able to incorporate that right into the Zoom meeting, which has been really, really helpful. So I just see, I see Zoom coming out with new features and new accessibility that they're offering. So I think that it's just going to keep getting better and being used more. And with people working at home, it's just, I just see it being really huge. And I know that in Montana, we've used it, like I said, this last year, we've used it with every meeting we've had, and it's been invaluable. And so I'm just always excited to hear what new things that Zoom has come out with to help us so we can make that work better in the system for us. And we've tried it out a couple times and tried different issues we've had with people come up to us and say they can't get it to work with an iPad or something. So we'll try it out and see if we can figure it out. So I just see that. I hope that it's all gonna just keep getting better. And that's pretty much my take.
Holly, the future of RCC. I think I agree with what everybody's been saying. There are a lot of positives that go along with RCC. At the same time, many, many more states are starting to offer it. And as that happens, we need to keep in the back of our mind that, how do I say, RCC, we need to make sure we're vigilant about maintaining customer choice and not taking away customer choice. We need to ensure that it's the customers themselves that are requesting and want to use RCC, and it's not being forced upon them by the businesses, for example, in lieu of a live interpreter. So that is one concern. RCC needs to be an option, and it only needs to be an option if the consumer so chooses. It should not be forced upon them because the business or the organization can get it at no cost. I completely understand that. This is Travis. So another question that relates to the future of RCC. I'm sure you all know that currently RCC is one-way relay. Essentially, it is only one way. So the caption conveys what is being said auditorily. Any thoughts about considering two-way RCC or two-way relay for us? Is that a possibility, do we think, as something that could be part of RCC's future? Is it considered truly equal access to be that? Should it be on demand? Now, of course, it's not. Should it be the same as TTY and TRS technology where you can connect immediately at any time? So these are things I've been hearing from out in the community. I mean, they do leave me wondering, do we have the possibility to improve our current RCC services for the users that we have? The question then becomes, where do we go from where we are right now? So I'm just wondering what your thoughts might be on that, the two-way aspect of the communication and on-demand RCC as potential things in the future. So if you wouldn't mind briefly speaking to that, anyone who'd like to. Holly, you can go ahead. Oh, and then Deborah.
Interpreter switch, one moment. Yeah, it can function as two-way communications, is Holly speaking. Ours is two-way, meaning the deaf or hard of hearing customer is able to type to the captionist, who then reads aloud whatever those remarks were from the deaf or hard of hearing participant. And it really, most of the time, people use the Zoom chat panel anyway for that kind of interactivity within the course of a meeting, but it does exist that you can communicate directly with the captionist, who in turn, at the appropriate time, inserts, verbalizes those comments into the meeting for the deaf on behalf of the deaf or hard of hearing person. Our provider, Sprint, T-Mobile, has offered that kind of bidirectional communication since the outset. To be quite honest, not many people use that feature because of the nature of the chat options in video conferencing software such as Zoom. And many people, like, if they were to use such a feature, it would be an audio only call, maybe not via a video conferencing platform with a built-in chat function. So a deaf or hard of hearing participant can access the captionist, who will in turn voice or verbalize or say aloud, read aloud, anything that the deaf or hard of hearing participant should type. It's a nice option, but again, it's really only as such for an audio only meeting. Travis speaking. This is something that, well, I would say the majority of people don't even know that that's an option. And it's on the part of our outreach folks to spread the word on that bidirectionality. It's still quite a nascent service, and we don't have all the information out there that we should for people to know about it. Moving along, I would like to allow our audience to enter questions at this time. I know that we've had some in the chat, and I'm happy for you, if you wouldn't mind, to re-enter your questions into the chat. And let me please give my apologies for the Zoom bombing. This is the first time I've personally seen or experienced that. And I cannot offer enough apologies for you to have witnessed that. We will certainly do better by y'all next time and filter folks. People change their names, and so it's difficult to know who's who. As you know, there was someone who asked about what was afoot with the federal relay GSA option, which is a huge hot topic right now. And GSA is expiring their federal relay come 15th of May, thereabouts. And the community were frankly up in arms and a bit shocked about that. The federal relay offers a suite of services, VRI, RCC on down the line. And so since they are sunsetting that part of their business, we just need to know sort of how states are going to handle or absorb that traffic and what that situation is. Holly, if you could talk more about that, if you would.
Well, right now, we don't know if that's going to impact our state RCC. We're going to make the assumption that many federal employees live in places like the DMV, Maryland, Virginia, DC, places of that area. So for the East Coast, there's going to be possibly a greater impact for those deaf and hard of hearing federal employees, because if they're no longer able to access federal relay, they might use the state RCC option. And of course, this holds true for other areas of the United States as well. But at this point, at this moment, I can't really predict what the possible impact would be.
Fair enough, Holly. Travis speaking. As a resident of Maryland, several people have been in touch with us after the federal relay announcement, and we've seen that some more is afoot in the last maybe month or so. So this is something we just have to keep an eye on going forward to make sure that we can absorb or handle what happens after that transition. All right, let's wrap up our panel for today. Let's give everyone a chance for their final remarks. If there's any kind of significant information, lessons learned, thoughts, really anything, potpourri, whatever you'd like to say in closing. We'll start off with you, Lori, if you wouldn't mind. From the looks of it, maybe you do, I don't know.
For us, the RCC has been a great service. I don't regret adding it. I think there's potential for growth. I think it would be nice as we look forward to expanding the hours of availability. We've done that once, but there's still some hours that aren't available. So I look to making things better in the future. And we're certainly happy to provide any information specifically to states if they want to know more specifics about what our contract says or how we're set up. So I would encourage it. And thank you. Thank you for putting this together.
Lori, thank you indeed. Deborah, let's hear from you if you would.
Hi, this is Deborah one more time. I'm here in the state of Maine, and I do all the outreach for the TRS and the RCC. I've enjoyed kind of thinking outside the box and reaching out to different areas. I'd love to talk to anybody who'd like to brainstorm with me or get ideas, share ideas related to the outreach aspect of RCC and how that's changed in the last year. So please definitely connect with me, and my email will be, I think it was in the flyer, my email, as well as Travis knows how to find me. Thank you for letting me be here.
Excellent, and thank you, Deborah. Mary, let's hear from you if you would.
All right, this is Mary. And again, I've seen just a lot of positive results from using remote conference captioning or relay conference captioning. And I guess the only takeaway I've had or lessons learned that I've had is I did have a meeting where it went over the allotted time. And so it's just important when you are using it to make sure that you stay within the time limit that you've set for the meeting, because they have a schedule as well. And then that causes the rest of the meeting not to be, you have no remote conference captioning. But other than that, I mean, I can't say enough good about it. I know I have people that prefer ASL. Some people prefer the RCC. We've used both in a lot of our meetings, and it's just been very helpful. And again, we're also able to answer any questions. If anybody has any, I'm be more than happy to help if I can. And thank you again for hosting this and for allowing me to be to help out. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mary. Holly, let's have you close it out. Truly, the benefits of RCC are there in states who use it, and it's like a 911 service. If you live in a state where you have text to 911, you get used to it. Were you to move into another state which does not have text to 911, that would become very onerous to you. And if you live in a state that offers RCC and you become used to having access to meetings in that way, and then you move out of state where you do not enjoy that, it can be a struggle to start from scratch again, and maybe encourage those local folks in your own states to put that on contract as a service to offer. Also, as a TRS administrator, I think that we really need to start thinking out of the box. And traditional relay is simply not going to give you the numbers anymore. They're in steep decline, and we need to figure out another way, other technologies, alternates for ways for people in their states to be supported and in availing of that new technology. I know that many states do not have the ability to pay for IP-based services. And so I think that's where state administrators really need to advocate strongly for policy changes, statutory changes, rule changes, and making sure that states do support IP-based services as a reimbursable expense. And so they need to see what's that's the future. And that's where the numbers are trending, certainly for TRS, away from TRS. And states require maybe legislative update or just a refresh in their thinking about how they would need to operationalize that to continue to provide access for people with disabilities and people with degenerative hearing loss. Thank you. That's great information for everyone to have. And I think every state should take this into consideration as they build out their future next steps with putting together RFPs. It is a hugely significant increase that we have seen certainly during this past year of pandemic. The trend line is steeply inclined, as we have said, and the RCC numbers are just going to keep getting larger and larger as people try to figure out how to navigate this world. So whether or not that keeps the culture the same, or whether or not that makes the workplace and home life and social life more virtual, these are significant things to think about. Once again, we want to thank all of our panelists for coming today and participating, giving their remarks, and having this robust discussion. I'm going to end the recording. Holly, you had your hand up. Did you have one other thing? For Maryland, the state of Maryland, I wanted to say that they are very active. As you well know, our state conferences was canceled due to the pandemic. So we really want to thank you in Maryland for making these kinds of moves and making sure the members have access to information and doing your part to inform us on the more recent developments in the TRS world. So we thank you, Maryland, for your work, your leadership, and making sure that states out there continue to get good information in absence of a national conference. This is Travis speaking. Now I need your help. Now I need your ideas and topics for future webinars. Yes, we do have a laundry list, but I'm always open to more ideas. And if you have a list, most people know RCC and RTT are very hot topics. So there's, maybe upwards of 30 things that we could talk about that we've heard from on the education front, and getting together on a monthly basis until such time as we can meet in person again at a national conference. Or who knows, we might be doing this for longer. I mean, it is, as a state relay administrator, this is a significant part of what we do to teach one another, share resources, best practices to see what benefits folks states to state so that they can emulate those policies and practices. Once again, we truly thank you for your participation and all of your help with this very important topic. I'm going to stop the recording and allow the participants to bring their videos up should they choose, and they can have a little social time after we wrap up. So thank you. I'll end the recording. Thank you to everyone.